Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for our March 2022 Astronomy Fundamentals program. When you're watching this, if you have any questions, if you're watching on Facebook, you can just put your question in as a comment on this video, and Chris will feed those to our speaker tonight. And if you're watching on our website, you can email questions@neighborastro.org, and we'll get those questions to Steve so he can answer those live for you. Tonight, Steve Sagarian is going to be talking to us about the RASC Handbook, and if that's right for you. So Steve got into astronomy back when he was in high school and built his first telescope, and he's been enjoying the hobby for about the last 50 years. Steve's also has been a member of the NAA since 2012, and the last few years he's been the club's librarian. So Steve, if you are ready, I will turn it over to you, and you can wow us on the RASC Handbook.
Thank you, Jim. Let me see if I can share my screen. Here we go. Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So tonight's fundamentals is really more of a book review, and the book we're going to be reviewing tonight as the librarian is the RASC Observer's Handbook. So my promise to you is that at the end of this book review, you will understand what the RASC Observer's Handbook contains and why you might want to own it in your personal collection. So let's get going. So who is RASC, or Rascals, or they are the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. And they are an organization that has been around since 1868, just a little after our Civil War here in the US, quite a long time. They have a really outstanding website. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about them, here's their splash page for their website. Apparently they have a robotic telescope, which we don't have. A lot of really nice member services. The one I like the most is the one on the very far right corner. They have member discounts for auto insurance. I'm gonna have to get on our member services officer to get that for us. Here is a screen scrape of the 30 centers. So they actually have 30 centers all over Canada. I think their main headquarters is in Toronto, and they actually have an office that is staffed by a real human person who is there, I guess, during business hours. But I thought that was actually interesting that they have 30 organizations across Canada. They also have a YouTube website. This is the RASC the main website for YouTube. A lot of content, a lot of great stuff. I think I would find the self-isolating star party to be an interesting set of videos. I might go and watch those at some point. What's also interesting is that each one of their affiliates, centers, have their own YouTube channel as well. The Calgary, Edmonton, Victoria, and a few more. So they're really active. They have a lot of stuff. They're doing a lot of outreach and stuff. Really good organization. One thing they do have that you might be interested in if you want to pursue learning more about the handbook is they actually have a series of their own. They talk about how to use the handbook, and they go into a lot greater detail than I'll go into tonight about the various sections of the handbook. So you can see there's, I think, 7 different YouTube videos. They range in time from about 38 minutes all the way up to an hour and something. So you could definitely burn a nice weekend binging on those. Here's a picture of my handbook. You can see it's well worn. This is the 2002 22 handbook. The first one was published in 1907, so that's quite a long time. It is nearly an encyclopedia of amateur astronomy information. You'd be hard pressed to find something that contains more information than what you'll find in this handbook. Primarily, it's a really handy guide for planning your observing activities, and we'll go into more detail throughout the presentation. One of the things that I keep reading about is that all of their internet links, resources are vetted. So every year, the various editors who provide content will check the URLs and make sure that every URL in the book is correct and it actually is functional and still exists. So that's, I guess, a comfort. There are a lot of just fun facts, useful information in this book. So here's the content by section. An introduction that introduces the editors and some of the historical stuff. A section on basic data, which is things like gravity, the gravity of planets, the mass, their just anything you can think of that would have to do with all the planets. There's a section on time that discusses things like Julian dates, the time between the rotation of our Earth and the rotation of the sky. There's a section on optics and observing, talking about things like exit eye pupil, just the parameters of your telescopes, the OTAs, its focal length and focal ratio and stuff like that. All those are defined in there. Probably the most useful section of the whole book would be the sky month by month. We'll talk about that in great detail. Eclipses, the moon, the sun, it's got everything. Planets, satellites. Each one of these sections goes into a lot of detail about things that are important for the amateur in terms of planning and getting the most out of your observing time. So here's a picture of the turn my laser here. Okay, so here's a picture of the content table of contents, and you can see those sections I just mentioned and their locations. What's really nice also is that they have these notations here. This N stands for new, so this is a new section. So there's a new section on observing artificial satellites, one on the Astronomical League, and then how to watch a solar eclipse. There's also these notations for that say R, which means that these sections have been revised. Actually, I guess the legend is right down here as well. So the section on filters has been revised, and astro sketching has been revised, and lunar occultations. And then, of course, things you'd expect to be changed from year to year would also be revised. So planetary, well, I guess in planetary dust, I'm not sure what that would be revised, but that'd be interesting to find out. Okay, basic data. Again, these are a lot of this stuff is not going to change from year to year, so it's sort of just general good information, reference material, physical data for planets, like I said, mass and density, gravity, rotational period, albedo, orbital elements of the minor planets and planets. There's a handy guide in there on the breakdown of the electromagnetic spectrum. I always can never remember whether infrared or where infrared is in the spectrum of light. I can never remember if it's higher or lower than other stuff. There's a really interesting table on planetary probes by year, and also a list of planetary probes that are scheduled to be launched. So, for example, let me see if I can pull it up real quick here. So the ones that have been launched, it talks about like Galileo, Voyager 2, the Mars rovers. And then on the table that talks about up and coming missions, the James Webb Telescope is listed here for 2021. I guess you missed that one. JUICE, the Europa Clipper. Those are all, you can, I guess what's really fun is you can look at this table this year and wonder whether they'll actually get launched in the time frame that they're expected, depending on Congress and just stuff, I guess. Okay. Here is an interesting page that I captured that shows basically the top view of our planetary system. I always can never remember where the opposition and conjunction or where they're at, but here's a diagram that shows that. The Earth is right here. I'm sorry, the Earth is right here. And then the greatest elongation west, greatest elongation east for the inferior planets, and then the conjunction and opposition for superior planets. So there's a lot of these diagrams in this book that are really handy, really useful in terms of getting your nomenclature and understanding, what's happening in the sky. The time section talks a little bit about natural time units, for example, year, month, and day, and how the year obviously is synchronized to our rotation around the sun. The month is linked to the moon, and our day is obviously linked to the rotation of the Earth. And it talks a little bit about how those rotations are synchronized and correlated to the movements, the sky and the movement of the stars. There is a coordinate system called the barycentric coordinate time system that basically is really, it's a physicist's dream, I guess. And basically what they do is they try to take out all the mass of the solar system and basically replace it with a coordinate system that is unaffected by gravity. So it's basically a gravity-free time system. And you can read about that when you get your book. The optics and observing section talks a lot about the definitions of the telescope, the magnification, its the optics, the diameter of the main lens and stuff like that. And then there are some diagrams that are really useful in terms of understanding how your exit pupil matches up with your telescope and the focal length of your eyepieces. So this is a chart that was asked. One of the members of the club asked me to show, and basically this axis here shows the various focal ratios of telescopes. So an f10 is right here, and you basically draw a line from this hash mark here down to the bottom of this axis, and then you can, from there you can say, okay, if I have a 24 millimeter eyepiece, how big is my exit pupil? And so you can read that off here, and that's helpful if you're worried about eye relief and getting the most out of that eyepiece. So there are these kinds of diagrams that are, again, useful. Some other sections include a discussion of night vision and eyeglasses, how to choose binoculars, the various filters. Of course, we've had a really good filter presentation in the past, all sorts of things, weather resources and light pollution, and then of course that new section, auto sketching. So lots of good stuff in here. This is a diagram that shows binoculars and how their objective diameter matches up with the magnification and gives you these kind of performance measurements in terms of how much light you'll see with different objective diameters. Of course, it would make sense that the bigger your diameter, the better. So these numbers, the higher you go, the better light seeing capabilities that those binoculars have. And it also shows you the eye relief of the exit pupil of the binoculars based on these parameters. Again, the magnification and the objective diameter.
Steve,
Yes.
we have a quick question here.
Sure.
Eric Plays asks, what's the difference between the USA edition and the Canadian edition?
Very good. That's a good question, Eric. The primary difference is that they use the UK spellings for things like center and color and neighbors, and but beyond that, the tables are the same. I'm told that basically all of the tables and the locations and the information is the same. So they've done some made some effort to try to spell in American English rather than Canadian or British. That's it, as far as I know. Any more questions, Chris?
At this time, no.
Okay, great. So I mentioned that the sky month by month is probably the most important and probably the most useful section of the whole book. And so it breaks out each month with 2 pages. The left page has a table that shows the sun's RA and declination over the month. Its distance from, I'm not sure if it's from us or from the sun. The magnitude, its visual magnitude and its angular size during that period of time. It also has a description of all the events that are going to be occurring in that month. On the right side, it's more information, kind of a summary of the same stuff, but in a graphical format, and we'll see that in a second. Phases of the moon with libations, occultations, algos min and max. It shows you that with data week to week, positions of the jovial moons, and then of course all these other events that are occurring. And so here's a really bad picture of it. So on the left side, you can see there's the RA and deck of all of the planets. Trying to see if I can tell. Yeah, I guess the magnitude for the sun is all blocked. It's just empty. That's interesting. Okay, and then on the description below, it talks about the various things that are happening this month. This is actually April for next month. There's a partial solar eclipse. Unfortunately, it won't be visible for us here in the US, but it will be visible in northern Antarctica, some parts of the South Pacific. And various discussions about things that are happening with each of the planets. So if you look on the right side, and there's a little bit more graphical flow to this, starting from the very first date. The 1st of April is going to be a new moon for us. That's going to be great. Algol is at a minimum. Uranus is 6 degrees north of the moon. And then there's a little footnote there that says, unfortunately, it talks about an occultation, but it says the occultation will only occur for, I guess, Southern America, the Ascension Islands, St. Helena, and some parts of Africa, some West Central Africa. And you can see there's a question?
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a question. What is Algol?
Algol is it's a rotating binary star that or set of stars that rotate around each other, and is it rotating binary? Anyways, it's a star that's a variable star, so it increases in magnitude, its brightness over a very short period of time, and a lot of beginning astronomers, hobby astronomers will use that as their kind of their first visual start to watch, see it vary in brightness over, I guess, over a month. I'm not sure what the actual period is. Let's see, what else can I point out to you? So yeah, you can see it talks about the, one thing, if you notice, there's a little dot here. Each one of these little dots here represents the area where, well, it represents the moon's libration, where it's kind of spinning and twisting at the same time, and so that a certain portion of the moon's illuminated side is actually more illuminated than, I think they actually have some notation here. Where's that? Maybe. Gosh, I don't see that now. But anyways, you can imagine if you're, it also talks about meteor showers. So here the Leonid meteors peak. They talk about when they start. It might be in the earlier month. Okay. So you can imagine if you're planning your observing for the weekend, you can go to this section of the book, pull it out, and take a look at what's happening this month, next month. If you get this, one thing I should have mentioned is that this books, they're published in October of the year before. So this October we'll get 2023. And so you could go through this month by month and plan maybe you see that there's a lunar eclipse, a partial lunar eclipse in San Diego. Maybe you could talk your wife into going to visit Aunt Violet at that period, and just take your, binoculars and get lucky. So with observing the planet partial eclipse. But the point of this is that you can use this as a tool for planning and for seeing what's happening, and then going, oh wow, I've never seen an occultation before. Maybe I should try and set up my telescope for whatever night that is, and witness that. So, okay. The section on eclipses has a lot of information about explanation of when eclipses occur. It has a really nice chart that talks about the path of, or actually shows the path of eclipses out to the year 2046. A list of all the eclipses that are going to happen in 2022. And actually there's, I think there are 4. Let me see if I can find that. Yes, so there's actually 4 this year. There's one in April, one in May, one in October, and one in November. The partial solar eclipse in April. There's a total lunar eclipse May 16th, a partial solar eclipse October 25th, and a total lunar eclipse November 8th. Now those won't necessarily be visible in Chicago, but you can certainly look at where they will be and plan it accordingly. The section on the moon has a really, really poor, terrible map of the moon. It shows craters, and has a section on where various probes have landed, a table of moonrise and moon setting, some observing tips on how to observe the moon. What it does have a really cool list of stars that are occultations that occur in 2022, so you can go look at that. And there's also a list of what's called grazing star occultations, and that's when a star will essentially graze the surface or the outer limb of the moon, and you can, if you're watching or videoing, taping that, you can see the star essentially dip or shine through the various geographic relief of the moon. And so a lot of people get really excited about that, and they'll go out and watch that occur. There's actually 2 of them this year in Chicago, or in the Chicagoland area. One on the September 13th, Omicron Pisces, and then October 18th, 24 Cancer. And that sounds exciting. I think I would enjoy watching that. The section on the sun, it has all the ephemeris for the sun, its declination, right ascension, some tips on how to observe the sun, obviously using various filters and protective techniques. One of the cool things, it talks about sky phenomena that is due to the sun. And here's a picture of a thing that I found really useful. This is a description of rainbows and how they occur. You can see this picture shows a water droplet, and then the light coming into the water droplet goes through cuts through the droplet, and then has an internal reflection, and then another internal reflection, and this secondary reflection here, and then this third one is actually labeled the primary and the secondary, I guess, ray. And this are what causes a rainbow and a double rainbow. And this is a picture that I took while out bike riding of that very fact. And what's interesting is that it shows that the primary is at the kind of below the secondary, and these lines here show the intensity of the light, the magnitude of the light coming out of the water droplet. And so you can see that this is a little bit thicker and therefore meant to represent a little bit brighter light than this other reflection. And you can see that here in the picture. This light is really, the magnitude of this light here is much brighter than the secondary. And then one other fact is that you will only see a rainbow from, the light has to be over your shoulder, essentially. I found that interesting. So I guess, what does that mean? If you're looking south, can you still see a rainbow, or is it north? Anyway, I just found this really interesting. I'd always wondered about this, and I'd read a description of it, and it didn't really make sense until I actually saw these 2 diagrams together. So pretty cool. Planets and satellites. Again, I'm not going to go through everything that's in this book. There's hundreds of tables and things that are really interesting to follow. Here is a picture of opposition of Mars from 2018 all the way up to 2033. And so each one of these little lines here represents when we're going to have an opposition. And it turns out we're going to have an opposition in December. It will be in the constellation Taurus, and it'll be approximately a half of a astronomical unit away from us at that time. So that's what this table is meant to represent. So that they show these 4 representations of Mars, and this little circle here is meant to represent the polar ice cap, and where to look for it in terms of when you actually look for this, when Mars is closest to us. This number here represents its actual angular size in terms of arc seconds. Very useful table. Okay. The section on meteors, comets, and dust has tables of meteor showers, classifications of meteors, how to identify meteorites, impact crater list. It has an impact crater list of all the impact craters in North America. And I was really surprised to find out that Des Plaines, Illinois actually is an impact crater. If you go look at the table, it will tell you that there are no visible signs, no geographic or no, crater wall kind of things that you can observe, but they've done core analysis of the area in that, where that crater is located, and found the shock materials that represent Earth strata that's been shocked by the sudden impact of a meteor. So they've been able to take the core samples and go, oh, there's a meteor here, and or a meteor hit this area at one time. Again, a lot of other additional lists appear at comets of this year. So there's a whole list of comets that'll be returning this year, and then a section on how to observe comets. Obviously, David Levy is obviously a very famous comet hunter. A lot of the sections in this book have been written by people who are in the profession. Many of the authors write the same section year after year, and they really pride themselves on polishing it, trying to make it more understandable, and obviously as accurate as they can make it. Oops, wrong way. Okay. Section on stars. Your standard list of constellations, names, abbreviations, that kind of stuff. I think every year they have an in-depth look at a particular constellation. This year it's Ophiuchus. One of the things I thought was really useful is this nearest star list. I can imagine being at an outreach and the 5-year-old asked you, how far is the star that you're showing through your scope? And unless you've prepared in advance by looking through this list or doing some other research, what do you say? You try to remember. But having this list, you can certainly look at that list and be prepared to answer those questions. For someone who's sort of wanting to explore different areas of astronomy, this I think is a really good area. It has a list of, if you've ever thought about, hey, I want to go look at double stars, I get to kind of see that. Here's a list of all the sort of merit badge flavored double stars. Carbon stars and color stars are really cool to look at, and so there's a list of those as well. And we mentioned Algol, there are variable stars, and there's a good discussion about the various types of variable stars. And I apologize for not knowing whether Algol is a pulsating or rotating binary. Oh well. Okay, I think we're almost done here. The deep sky. This is obviously things like Messier objects, NGC objects, dark nebula, whole bunch of tables and lists of things that you should try and go look at. Deep sky gems, a discussion about radio astronomy, and the very last section has a bunch of sky maps that are typical, like the ones we would hand out at outreach. Okay, so in summary, the Observer's Handbook is a really good planning tool for planning your observing. It's also a really good knowledge resource. Now, I will say that it doesn't replace your Sky Atlas, your Moon Atlas, or your Deep Sky Messier or NGC catalogs. Those things I think are probably more important in terms of something you would take to the field. This is a reference that you would keep with you and use as to answer questions you have about what you're looking at or that kind of stuff. It's an excellent reference written by knowledgeable authors. It's also, this last point, it's a great resource as a launching pad for exploring different astronomical activities. So if you're new to the hobby and you're thinking, gosh, I've got a telescope and I'm sort of starting to understand, learn about the constellations, what can I go look at with my telescope? Well, you can look through this book, and you can read the various kinds of objects that are out there, and then you can sort of decide, pick one. There's usually a list of the easiest objects to see, and go from there. And if you don't like looking at variable stars, then maybe you might want to go look at double stars, or maybe you want to look at deep sky objects. So it's really useful from that point of view. It's also useful for, you know, the old timers who kind of know what they want to look for, and they might be working down a list to see an occultation that's very rare, that only happens once every 11 years or something like that. Let's see. I think that's it. Are there any other questions?
I have one myself. Is there an electronic version?
There is not. They at one time they did do a PDF version, and I think you can, if you're a member of the club, you can probably buy one, but they don't generally make those useful. Their revenue stream, one of the things that supports the club activities is the purchase of these handbooks. So every year, you know, they have they publish these, they print them, and then they sell them, and that kind of, and so they don't really want a PDF version like this to be floating around the internet. So. Any other questions?
Checking my email here. I don't see any at the moment.
Okay, great. Well, I have one last announcement.
Oh,
so
yeah, I'm sorry. There is one that just popped in. How much does it cost?
I think we paid $24 for them through the club, through the Naperville Club. I think if you buy them through the Astronomical League, they're maybe 25 with shipping or something like that. But it's in that range, $24 to $25. So that's it.
Okay.
Thank you for your attention.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much. Good presentation. And unfortunately, I do not see any further questions at this time. So I think we are finished quite early this evening.
Excellent.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Have a good one, everybody.